Well, I started at Parkfield High School a long time ago now, and when I went there I was a new teacher, so I'd not anything to compare it with at the time, but as I stayed there for until it moved to here, and I had various different jobs in there. I started off as an English teacher, I did work experience, I ran departments, quite a lot of departments. I was on SLT for a little while, and generally a long association with Parkfield High School in its many variant because I was there that long. I think people forget that if you're in a school a long time, you might be in the same buildings but you're not necessarily in the same school. And it did change in character as time went on. So I could talk about Parkfield the building, I can talk about Parkfield the school.
Can I be cheeky and ask when you started there, what year you started there?
I started there in 1981. So I was there a long time, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, talk to me about the building, because I know that it sort of almost fell down, it was rebuilt.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big building. It was I can't remember the original building really, because it was knocked down very soon into my being there, but it stood there from, I think it was opened in 1963, the original building. It was a big 3-storey building, 3 sets of stairs, cloakrooms in the corridors, 1 lift, no lift at all, and it also had a separate swimming pool, hall and dining hall, science block, art block, and later additions came with hairdressing salon, separate hairdressing salon, which actually catered for some customers from outside the school as well as inside the school, and a construction block where they did plastering and building. And they also had massive fields. The fields behind the school, there were several pitches. There was an all-weather pitch, there was a full-size running pitch, and there was an urban forest at the bottom of the site as well. So it occupied a lot of space, the school.
How many pupils were there? Can you remember? It must sound like a big school.
Yeah, when I first went there, it was 10 form entry, and there were 25 children in each form at least. So it was at least 250 children per year for the 5 years, plus they had a 6th form and a decent sized 6th form as well. So it was, for that time and even for now, a pretty big school. And it continued to be so up until very near to the end, when the numbers started to decline a little bit, mainly due to the change in the environment around it, because initially there were far more terrace streets than there were later on, and obviously the terrace streets and the old houses started to get displaced. Newer places were built but not necessarily nearer the school, and our actual intake changed in character. When I first went there, there was quite a large Afro-Caribbean intake, quite a large and very few people from the Asian subcontinent, whereas as time went on there got to be less Afro-Caribbean children and more children whose origins were from India. So we always had a sort of at least 50% Caucasian children there, but the rest of it changed quite a lot over the time, mainly, as I said, due to the fact that the area itself changed.
Were you there at the time when they were teaching in the mobiles?
Yes, I was.
So
yes, I was.
Something about those?
Yeah, the old school, a crack developed between the 2nd and 3rd floors, and it became apparent that there was something wrong. It was something to do, I'm not 100% sure, but it was something to do with the asbestos and the concrete and things like that, so it's quite dangerous. The council, because obviously it was council school, the council prevaricated for 12 months and it remained empty while they were trying to find a way of not having to provide a new school and just patch up the other one. And then it was rebuilt, so it was a year in the mobiles while it was empty and a year in the mobiles while it was being built. It was basically 3 winters in the mobiles, which was difficult. There were about 30, if not more, mobile classrooms set up on the fields, set up on the all-weather, in rows. They all got a name, like this was Z row and this was X row and so on, and a couple of slightly bigger hut type things for offices and things like that. There's parts of the school that were still open, with the very front where the admin office was. The science block was still open because that was a separate building, and the art block was still open because they were separate buildings and had been additions to the original building, so therefore they weren't affected by this dodgy concrete or whatever they've been put in.
Looking at old maps of Bilston, that was a site of mining in that area as well. So I guess that
mining everywhere.
Might have
mining everywhere. May well have done, because there's mining. I mean, there's mining underneath. There's probably mining underneath this building.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't escape it in this area, can you? But as I say, they're prevaricated. But in the classrooms themselves, they were decent sized classrooms. You could get all your 30, because they were big classes, all your 30, 35 kids in there. They had a little stock room in each one. There were steps up to it. But obviously, you had to go, the students and staff had to go outside the classrooms at the end of every lesson, walk along to another classroom to go inside. So in the winter, in the bad weather, it was quite difficult for the students. It was difficult because they had to carry all that, and their movement between the classrooms had to obviously be monitored to some extent. I know it sounds really a naughty thing to do now, but I do know that there were some staff who used the fact that the classroom was outside the classroom was an outside space to even put some disrupted students to work outside with their desk, so that they weren't being a distraction to everybody else. I've seen that happening.
You couldn't do that now.
You certainly couldn't do that now. But to be honest, the students responded extremely well, because it could have been a very difficult situation, and the staff responded exceptionally well to what was a very awkward situation, because you were in and outside on a field. You were on your own in your classroom. There wasn't an adjoining classroom. It was another mobile further up or further to the side or whatever it was. So it could have been quite isolating, really. But one thing about that school, and I can't stress this enough because I really appreciated it more now when I've seen other schools, there was a camaraderie amongst the staff for a long time that kept people going. There was massive support at that school, from older staff to younger staff, in departments and everything. I mean, I remember when I was new and I was first there were a collection of people who, not necessarily in my own department as well, although including people in my own department, who went out of their way to help you and to be supportive and to be there for you if you needed them. And I don't think I really appreciated how good that was until later on, when I realised it was the philosophy was, because sometimes we had difficult SLT, not necessarily all the time, but sometimes, was encircle the wagons, surround people who needed help and make sure that they were okay. It was a very good staff to work for. I've never worked for a better staff, with a better staff, than the staff I had in probably the first 10, 15 years I was there. It was incredible.
That's wonderful. And how did it feel when you had the brand new buildings?
Oh yeah, it was really nice. I mean, for those people who've been in the old buildings, it wasn't all that much different, because although it was a new building, it was on exactly the same footprint as the old one. They built it up because I don't think they did anything with the foundations. I think they just built up from it. It no longer had 3 sets of stairs, it had 2 sets of stairs, and the cloakrooms went from the corridors, because it's gone out of vogue to have cloakrooms then to hang up. But the school itself was very similar, apparently, inside, similar classroom spaces. It had got very wide corridors, which was something that we were very lucky. They were very lucky that the head at the time a chap called Jack Wrigley, passed now obviously, was very involved in making sure that we got exactly what he wanted us to have. You used to see him walking around the corridors with his hard hat on, working with the workmen and everything like that. And we had a really good school for the width of it, the facilities of it, the shape of it, everything about it was really good.
And how were the students? What are your memories of what they were like as a...
The students, I mean, a lot of people outside the school, it wasn't a school that had a particularly good reputation in the area, but I think that reputation was not necessarily a realistic one. Within school, although some of our children came from very troubled backgrounds and very poor backgrounds, they came into school with a respect for the school. They respected what the school did, they respected what the staff did, and they realised that we were all working for them, and they showed their appreciation of that. You know, they were respectful to each other and respectful to staff.
How do you think that's changed?
I think that there is a different, what shall we say, it's not quite the same now, in that I think students now have more materialistic things in their lives and therefore expect more. And so things that you do are not necessarily thought of as exceptional, or thank you for that, or aren't we doing well with this. I think to some extent there's less, gratefulness is the wrong word, you shouldn't be grateful, it's your right as a student to have a good education, but they don't, I think as much about what staff in some cases put into them. I think the children that we've got here, I think in the main are very polite and to a large extent very well behaved children, and I know that staff enjoy teaching them. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong about them. It's just I think that society's expectations have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to Parkfield, what's can you tell me about how the idea of merging with Hall Green happened, and what sort of
the authority,
what happened there?
The school that was on this site, which had various names through its years, Stonefield, Hall Green, Bilston High, the catchment area for that school diminished greatly because the big factories closed, the steelworks closed, the Sankeys over the back closed, and therefore there weren't so many children in the area, and their roles fell, and they fell to a level, I believe, that made it not sustainable for them to remain as an independent secondary school. There were first, Wolverhampton Education Authority obviously wanted therefore to link them with another school, and they were first linked with Colton Hills School. We weren't the original school that they were linked with. They were linked with Colton Hills School, and in fact Colton Hills School is further on past us, as it were.
Where is Colton? Where was Colton?
It's still there, it's a big school. Do you know where the Wolverhampton Road is, where Parkfield School was?
Yeah.
You know the estate across the road where Park Hall Hotel is?
Roughly, yes.
Colton Hills School is practically
right,
next
so
to Park Hall Hotel.
To,
yeah, it is quite close. But we used to see their coaches, the Hall Green coaches, going by our school on their way to Colton Hills initially. But then for some reason, Colton Hills School decided that they didn't want to continue the association with the other school, and I believe that the management were requested that they take it on, you know, the management of our school, would they consider, and they suggested that they would. And that's how we first started this merger with what was, I think it was it Bilston High at that stage? It may have been Bilston High School. It may have been Bilston High School.
I haven't quite got that timeline right yet, but it could
and we had staff from our school, because quite a lot of their, obviously with their situation, a lot of their staff were leaving, were getting other jobs because of, I suppose there was an insecurity factor in there. So some people from our school, from Parkfield High School, went down there to teach down there when we became part of it, although there was still a number of staff who had been long-serving staff at that school, and they went down, people from school went down to teach there, and then as time went on and it became apparent that the school was not going to increase its numbers really, they decided to use that school. Later stages, English and Maths went down there. The whole of the English and Maths department went down there for 12 months, and we taught down there.
To Hall Green.
Down to Hall Green. And we would the students came down from Parkfield High on coaches, and we had, because I was running English at the time, and we had every day we had 2 year groups down. So we had, say for example, on Monday we could have had, say, year 8 and year 10, and they came down there and they did 3 lessons of maths and 3 lessons of English, and then they came down perhaps twice a week, so they had their 6 lessons, and we had all the year groups came down on that basis. So all the year groups had their English and maths. They had 2 year groups down.
Came from
Parkfield to Hall Green on coaches, yeah. And obviously there were still students from Hall Green that were still being taught
so it
there.
didn't work, it wasn't happening the other way then?
Not particularly, no.
Okay.
Not although they did go up for some of their lessons because they didn't have facilities for swimming or anything like that, because they never had a swimming baths or anything like that there. And they did go up for some of their lessons. They had their own science block down here, so the science was down here because they had a new science block. Well, new in relation to the school. It wasn't a very old science block, which was separate from the school. It was part of the school, but separate down an incline. It must have been about here, the science block. So they had their own science block, and generally speaking, it lasted. I think that lasted for about a year, and then after that year 7 came down, I think, to do COPE or something like that. And then after that was when the school was being built. This school started to be built, and obviously in the end we all moved to here.
What do you remember of the Bilston High Hall Green building?
Oh, quite a lot, because obviously I was down here for quite a while, and I used to come down before we came down to do English and Maths down here. I came down to do some retake English and some of the things like that down here, because they hadn't got enough staff of their own down here. And I can remember the building. It was a lovely building inside, really nice character building. And I mean, okay, it was an old building, but it was a solid building, and they had nice classrooms, big classrooms with big drop windows, the old-fashioned drop window classrooms, although they had got quite a lot of false ceilings in there, because the rooms were just too high really. It was mainly a 1-storey building, but there were 4 classrooms on upstairs, 2 on one side and 2 on the other. I saw the 2 on this side, they were turned into computer rooms. Never saw the 2 on the other side, because that corridor, those little set of stairs, was fastened off. So I presume that the rooms upstairs there were not able to take the students in there. But you could tell that some of the rooms had been different things. I mean, I know in one of the maths rooms, for example, there was like a water guttering down the side, because it had been a science block or an art block or something like that. And the massive PE or hall had still got some of the PE stuff on the walls, like the ropes and things like that, when it was being used as other schools. And they had their own playgrounds. It had originally, as you probably know, been a boys and girls school, and the boys and girls names were still over the entrances, although the wall that went between the 2 playgrounds had been demolished by that stage, But yeah, it had got a lovely bell tower, and things like it had a wooden plaque in the hall with the names of students who had from that school who had given their lives in the 2 world wars, because obviously it had been there during both the world wars. So there was a lot of character about the place.
Very old building,
Lovely.
Victorian building.
1902, I believe it was open. Yeah.
So how was it? How did it all? How did you feel? How did people feel when this was being built and you eventually moved into this?
Because it was done over quite a lot of time, and because we'd already had the joining, as it were, for some of the things, and the way it was handled, because I was a governor at the time, still a governor at the time, and also as a member of staff, we were able to come down and have a look at the place being built. We were shown plans about it. We were involved in processes. We were able to put forward ideas about what we thought the building should be like. So we had a massive part in how it was being built. And because of that, I think we felt quite involved with this new building before it came. Obviously some people left when Parkfield closed, but I think a lot of people would have left anyway. And there was some, because of the fact that some of the roles were duplicated, because there was the people on both sides who held the same roles, and therefore there were some people whose jobs perhaps didn't exist anymore. So there was a loss of staff in that respect. And some people, and remember this is going back now 12 years, so it wasn't as obvious as it is now, some people didn't want to work in an academy chain, so that they took the opportunity, because there were a lot more schools that were still local authority schools at that time, to stay and go to a local authority. But generally speaking, people viewed it, I think, very positively. They knew that this had got to happen, that the school had got to be amalgamated, that we couldn't keep on having a split site school. And because we moved as a school and not as individuals, so we all became part of it, I think it was accepted quite well. And plus, of course, it's still a really lovely school. It hasn't been, I mean, there's nothing really different about it, although some of the rooms have had to be used as classrooms because the numbers of people were low, numbers of students were lower at the beginning than they are now. The numbers have built up quite considerably now.
So that leads to a question: how is this school viewed? You said that Parkfield at one time was seen as perhaps not.
I think when we first came here, I don't think the community, not because it was Parkfield, but because it was a school here, I don't think it was viewed particularly brilliantly. But I think as time's gone on and the school has developed, the school within the community has developed, I think it's far more appreciated and higher rated than it was. I think it's become an integral part of the community. And I know, for example, bringing it right up to date, I know that Dan, the head, is very positive in the way that he wants us to be a school in the community rather than a school on the side of the community. And I think now, of course, that we don't have so many children now from over towards Wolverhampton, over down the Wolverhampton Road, because obviously the children who came here at the beginning had started school at Parkfield and came from that area. We don't have so many children now from All Saints, from Blakenhall, from the traditional areas that we have, and we have far more children obviously from the Bilston area than we did. So I think
it's a local school for local.
It's a local
children.
School. I mean, we still have quite a few people from that end. And because if you think about where Parkfield School was, the nearest school apart was probably Colton Hills within the authority. The next one was probably Deansfield, which is now called St Matthias, and they were not necessarily that near to where people lived. So there's still students who come here from that area, but then of course it was the bulk of students, and that was why we had to have so many coaches in the beginning, and that's indicative of the fact that we haven't got so many, the fact we don't need coaches to bring our children in anymore.
And I guess if the numbers are rising, that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, we're at capacity. I think we're actually being asked to take on more children. I mean, our PAN number is, I think it's 200, it may be 230 now. So I mean, we've got we've got a reasonable insight. It's still not quite as high as it was when I first went to Parkfield. It's never quite caught up with itself.
There were bigger schools then, because
Yeah,
when
there
I
were.
was at school in the 70s at high school, we were 1,800 at our school.
Yeah,
You know, so
yeah.
it's similar sort of.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Really
And you
big
had
school.
loads of classes in each year, and lots of teachers, you know, and things like that. There were, I think, less schools. Whether the birth rates changed as well might make a difference.
So was there any sadness?
Oh yeah, I
about
mean,
this
people
school
were
then?
sad in the sense that we'd never be the same community again. We'd never be in the same buildings again. I think there was sadness with that, but there was also an anticipation of, well, it's something new, and we're on the ground floor with it. We're
And I
new.
guess for somewhere like Bilston, because it was a heavily industrial area at one time, and when all that went, it must have been quite a. It went down sort of physically and.
Oh, I think that's
socially,
fair.
didn't it? So
and
having
they
these lovely new buildings and
That's
the leisure
it,
centre
yeah.
and so on. It's
picked it up, yeah, and Morrison's,
Yeah.
you know, which obviously it looks good and everything, doesn't
absolutely,
it? You know,
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to know there's a bit of investment.
I mean, Bilston East was one of the most, and I don't know whether it still is because they've changed the boundaries, was one of the most deprived areas in the country, never mind in the area, or, you know, Bilston East was a very deprived area. In the same way that some of the areas that we had when we were over on the other side, like the areas that we served over there, All Saints, Blake and Hall and so on, were quite deprived areas. I've never worked in a leafy suburb school.
Well, take it from me, who did for a while.
Well, a friend of mine who worked with me at Parkfield, she went from there to Old Swinford, the hospital school, and she says there it's a different, obviously very different, but tremendous pressure from parents who have expectations of what their children will achieve far higher than perhaps, you know.
That is brilliant. I'm going to stop it there because you've answered all my questions, and
I haven't
lovely.
even touched on things
Well-
that you'd ask, like, what do I remember about things
oh,
at
yeah,
school?
we haven't done that, have we? Okay, do you want to do that now? Or do you want to do another session?
It's up to you.
No, I'm happy to carry on.
What?
Tell me, of course we haven't done that. Tell me about sort of any particular memories of things that happened, events or funny things, sad thing, anything.
Well, I'll start off with a funny thing and then talk about a sad thing and then talk about other different things. A funny thing that happened was that we had a resident caretaker. Do you remember when they had resident caretakers in houses? And our resident caretaker was quite a funny chap. And one day the school staff, because the school staff had quite a few teams after school, like their football team and that, they'd had a football match. And the football, towards the end, had been kicked onto the top of the swimming pool. And one of the members of staff, they all went home, and one of the members of staff thought, oh, I'll get the ball off the roof. Got on the roof, couldn't get off the roof, and trying to get off the roof, some people in nearby houses saw someone on the roof. So they phoned the police, and they went to the police. The police came and said, what are you doing there? And he said, I'm a member of staff, I'm just going to get this. And the caretaker obviously came out because he was by the house, and they said, this man on the roof, he says he's a member of staff. Can you confirm that? And Mr. Walker, the caretaker, looked at him and said, I've never seen him before in my life. I don't know who he is. I've never seen him. And he allowed them to take him to this member of staff, whose name I won't mention, to the gate before he said, actually, I do know who he was. A really sad time was, unfortunately, we had one occasion, it was passed over only a couple of weeks, where we had two people who'd been at the school only the previous year or two were both killed in a car crash. And they both had families in the school and everything. And we had a young girl who was in year 10 who unfortunately passed with leukemia. And on the same day, we had those 3 funerals at the school, and the hearses all went past the school and stopped at the school, and three on the same day. That was it. a very,
Can't imagine that.
a very, very sad event, because they were all, I mean, she was an absolutely lovely girl, and the two boys were very, were lovely lads, you know, and that was really, really sad. As we go, I mean, there were other sad occasions. Unfortunately, we lost quite several children in accidents and things like that over the time I was there. Happier events, though, happier events. The trips. We used to always take all the kids out on a trip at least once a year, always. And because of the catchment area we had, for quite a lot of kids, that was, they'd never been to Seaside. They didn't know what Seaside was or anything like that. But when you think about how the trips were, you'd never do it now. You would never get away with it now. I mean, we used to take the kids on the train, for example, to Rhyl. We used to just walk to the station, get on the train, went to the station, went on the train, let them work in Rhyl and things like that. Or Blackpool, we went to Blackpool on coaches. We used to drop them off at the top pier, and then say, we'll see you in 2.5 hours at the middle pier, and then, well, we'll see you at such and such a time on the pier by the amusement arcade. And we never saw them in between unless we happened to come across them. And they were just these 3 little registers.
And everything was
And
okay.
everything was fine, but we took them loads of places on trips. They always went, not only to Seaside, but to amusement parks and everywhere. We had some really good trips. The staff were really good, and the kids loved it, absolutely.
Did you ever go to the Towers?
I didn't personally, but we went to Towers. The school went to Towers. PE staff went to Towers. Yeah, they did. They went there, and we had a strong DV unit, but we're a member of the English department actually. He was also a head of year, Mr. Edwards. He ran the DV, and we had right up to gold on DV, and they went on loads of things. It was you know, a lot of children got a lot of things out of that.
And how is that changed now? Because I know certainly when I was in schools, going out on trips became very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we had to do the risk assessments to the same level at all. Nobody ever did a risk assessment about how you got on the coach or how you got off the coach or what you did in between time, or, you know, I mean, I went on and ran loads of trips, and we just had a list of names with phone numbers, house phone numbers obviously, or occasional mobile phone numbers, and off we set, basically. That was it. And you just assumed, you made massive assumptions that they were going to be okay, and in most cases they absolutely were. I mean, if you went somewhere, there were always some children who came round with you because they hadn't got the confidence to not be with. They wanted to know where they are. But the rest of them, they just went and did what they liked, and then they came back and told you all about it, and told each other what they'd been doing with the day. And I mean, I'm sure there must have been some risk assessment, but it would have been written on a piece of paper somewhere, wouldn't it? You know.
Not as formal, because I think, I don't know about now, but things had to be submitted to when it was the LEA at one time.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
It would take you weeks to organise.
I mean,
that.
well, you look at just as an example of how things have changed. When I started there, and remember I'd not taught before, when I started there, I saw a member of the LEA once, and that was on the last day to sign off my form. Nobody ever came to see how you were getting on. Nobody ever came in your classroom to see how you were getting on. And of course at that time, as it would be with you when you started, you didn't have any teaching assistants or anything like that. It was you and the kids.
Yeah.
And you had all of them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's changed over time, isn't it? The number of auxiliary roles in school that they just didn't have.
Yeah, I think we sometimes have mums or grandmothers coming in
to help,
the kids read or something like that.
Yeah, or help with painting or stuff like that. You know, but nothing else. You never had anyone else in your classroom. You went into classroom, shut the door, and it was you and them.
I think now, certainly in every primary classroom, as you say, there's a teacher and a teaching assistant in every single clarsroom, which is fantastic to one degree. But
they never had any teaching assistants at all. And you did, I know, obviously, Ofsted wasn't there. You had LEA inspection, if you had one at all. You know, I mean, the fact that I can't really remember them indicates that they weren't very high up on the profile.
I don't remember ever being inspected by LEA. They might have been in to have a look around. But
I never remember anybody coming into your classrooms and doing things. You know.
So how do you feel about the sort of not being political, about the sort of pressure on staff about Ofsteds these days?
I think staff nowadays, especially the younger staff, I think they have a lot of pressures. Okay, people say, well, they don't know any different because it's always been like that for them. But I think they're monitored massively now, and the expectations of what they will produce is massive now. I mean, let's face it, you taught and I taught at times when differentiation wasn't a different set of work for every child, and you didn't have to fill in all the paperwork that you did now. I mean, your classroom plan was just what you said. It was a picture of the desks in your classroom with the name on each desk.
Yeah.
Virtually, wasn't it? There was no additional information about it.
And I found a planning book of mine. It was like an A4, and it was like summer term, topic, colour or something.
Yeah.
And then I'd do a spider diagram and maybe a few notes, but it wasn't probably as intense as
No,
it used to be
nothing.
now.
No, it wasn't as detailed, was it?
Natural curriculum or anything.
I mean, you knew exactly what you were
Oh
doing,
yeah, I knew.
and the kids knew what you were doing, and you
Absolutely.
followed the process.
I think it was better in some ways, but not as thorough in others. I mean,
I think it enabled you to go off at tangents, good tangents, where the kids expressed an interest or asked a question, and you were able to divert from it. I think nowadays there's less of that because of the fact that their concerns perhaps wrong, but because there's an expectation that there will be somebody in a learning walk or whatever it is, people tend to stick to what they've said they do.
When I was doing my teacher training, we were encouraged to go off
Yeah,
piece. I mean, they'd say exactly that. Oh, if a child comes up with an idea, be prepared
flow
to
with
abandon
it.
all your
Yeah,
planning.
flow with it.
Whereas now, as you say,
Yeah,
that's like,
this is your plan. Oh,
that's it.
you've got to do this. And I think there's more uniformity, may be the wrong word, but within each classroom there's a set way of doing things. This is how we start the lessons, this is how we finish the lessons, and so on. Nobody ever told you how to start or finish a lesson or anything like that. I think there was a freedom in teaching that there perhaps isn't nowadays.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I mean, I can understand the monitoring, I understand wanting to make sure that the students are getting everything that they need and each child is getting what they need. But I think in some ways it restricts the way that people teach.
I think it's made.
And you'd collect resources yourself as well.
Okay,
You didn't, I mean, nowadays they tend to, it's co-planning and everybody's got the same resources. You had your own resources, didn't you? You know. I tell you another thing that they did at Portfield, they were talking about community. They had a massive Christmas party for pensioners, old age pensioners and things at Christmas. And it was really big party. And you can tell that the times have changed because one of the biggest excitements for the visitors when they came was halfway through when the sherry came out, and everybody had and you could see them go around, and some of them they used to say, if you were going around with the sherry, they'd say, is yours the Harvey's? Is yours the Harvey? Or the cheap one from down the road. And there were loads of, it was really good. It was a big thing. And the students did such a lot of work with it. They were the ones serving, they were the ones preparing. We had all that, and that was quite a long time before it became the vogue to do anything. We had big Christmas parties. And we had massive summer fairs on the fields with different stalls, loads of different stalls and games and loads of kids involved. We had those for years. You can tell our summer fair, you could hear it coming down the school because we had the brass band. The brass band used to start picking up people on the way, as it were, and by the time they got to school, we had a load of people following the band into the school for the summer fair. We had hog roasts and everything. It was really a very big summer fair. It was really.
That seems to have gone as well.
Yeah, it does. But that was really good. And it involved such a lot of parents and that, real community events like that, and those were. We also had like productions, a lot of productions. The drama department, especially under a chap called Martin Morgan, who later went on, in fact, to become the head at Smestow School. And he'd put on really, really good shows involving loads of kids, and they were quality performances. And we had a lot of people do that. But we also had a different sort of performance in that we had the staff group and the staff band. and they performed and they were funny. They were talented, but they were funny, you know, and we had some really good staff events like that, staff quizzes, everything. There were lots of things that involved the school. You don't seem to get that staff event so much now.
No, I think there's almost...
No, you went in occasionally, and you always went, if you taught in secondary, you always went in for the results and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But you didn't go in a lot in the holiday,
Certainly in primary we did, you know, and we were encouraged, like, it's your holiday. You know, obviously you did some prep, but you didn't spend the first
you
2 or 3
didn't
weeks
spend,
of the
yeah,
summer
you didn't
holidays
have
working.
2 weeks out of the 6 where you actually had a holiday and the rest of it was spent working.
No, not at all, but
You
I
know.
still got everything done, I think.
That's the thing, you see, sometimes think to yourself, well, how come we managed to do everything? And how come the kids still got good results?
Seem to,
You know, they still had good results, didn't they? You know, but they were, I think one of the reasons, I know it seems a trivial reason, but one of the things that they haven't got here, never had here, but had it apart from in most schools at that time, was a proper staff room. And you mixed with everybody from all departments in the staff room, and you all sat together and you made friends with other people. This school, for example, there's no staff room. There are different rooms on each floor, aren't there? Workrooms on each floor. But unfortunately, I think one of the things that happens in tall buildings like this, where departments are on the floor, is that often they tend to just mix with the people in their departments.
Yeah, you won't go upstairs.
Yeah,
or
whereas
downstairs.
I think that was one of the reasons why we had such good staff camaraderie at Parkfield, because we had a proper staff room, and therefore you knew everybody. You could sit by anybody in the staff room from any subject area and have a chat and have a laugh, and I think that was a good thing. You know.
And also, I don't know what it's like here, but at some high schools I know that they only have like a 20-minute break or something.
Well,
like
yeah,
that. So there isn't
yeah.
the opportunity to sit down for half an hour
I
and
know.
have a good moan or a good...
I mean, when I
chin
first
moan.
started at Parkfield, I forget what time we had to be there, but I know we had a morning break and an afternoon break. I know we went on longer, we went on till well after 4, but about 4:15, 4:30. We had an afternoon break, and we had an hour and 15 minutes lunch. Can you imagine it now, an hour and 15
It
minutes?
seems like they cut it down.
Now
just
we have
to-
half an hour.
Yeah, just to stop any potential...
Yeah. Mind you, of course, at that stage, that's another thing that's changed, isn't it? Is that quite a lot of students went home for lunch. They went home for lunch, they went home for their dinner and came back.
Yeah, I did.
So
until I got to sixth form.
the lunchtime had to be long enough to facilitate that, didn't it? Whereas now, nobody goes home for lunch.
Nobody at all.
No, there isn't, is there? I don't know if it's the same in all school, but nobody here does.
No,
They
I
either-
think most... No, certainly not at primary.
No,
Maybe the
they
odd...
They
Yeah,
don't
but-
go home for lunch, they stay in school all day. So therefore the school day is accommodated in a different way. And because they all stay, like for example here, they have to have the 3 lunches, because they wouldn't... Before, you didn't have to have different kids having lunch at different times, because the number of children who went home and the number of children who stayed meant that the number of children who stayed could fit into the dining hall. You know, whereas now they have to have these 3 lunch times, and lunchtime is a long time if you look at it as a lunchtime area. And there hasn't been afternoon breaks for a long time, but we do finish earlier, as I say.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was, I can't remember whether it was 4:15 or 4:30, but it was at least 4:15 when we finished. And I don't think there's many schools go to that. I mean, some schools finish at 3 o'clock now, even before 3 o'clock, some schools.
No, I mean, certainly primaries are all done by 3:30.
Yeah,
Like, that's a different thing, I know, but it's...
yeah. So those are just things like that make a changes that you don't think, but they do make a difference to how the school is run.
Absolutely.